I've spent 50 hours playing Dune Awakening solo, and the big question I kept asking myself was, is it worth it alone? Can you really enjoy this game without a crew behind you? And the answer is complicated. I definitely enjoyed what I've played so far, but your mileage will vary significantly depending on how much grind you're willing to put up with, and what you want out of the endgame. So let's run through my 50 hours, and I'll also throw in some tips here and there. If you're new to the game, there are a few choices you can make that really speed up your progress. At a base level, the moment-to-moment gameplay scratches a very specific itch in my brain. The one that likes to see numbers tick up, resources stack high, and systems click together. Almost like a third-person Factorio. It starts small, some copper here, iron there, but it grows pretty fast. And it was incredibly satisfying to see my base grow over time and improve in productivity as I researched new tech. There's also some surprisingly great quality of life here. Boxes automatically sort similar materials, vehicles can be accessed like mobile chests, and when it works, the crafting system is a dream. If it's in your base, it's usable at your stations, water, or it just works, without you needing to jump back and forth to make sure the materials are on your character. You go out into the world, bring back the right materials, make the next mining laser to get the next materials, and so on. If you played an MMO or survival crafting game, you know the drill. It was around the steel making phase that I started noticing the grind. I was low on water, but I was able to build some wind farms, some Fremen deathbeds, and suddenly water was the least of my worries. That progression bump kept me going. It felt good to solve a problem and move on to the next. That's my first big tip, by the way. Complete the Fremen questline, at least until you get the Fremen deathbeds. They let you siphon water from the corpses of enemies you kill, and they are huge time savers. A single corpse gives you like 25,000 water from memory, and you'll be needing it. You need tons of water once you get to steel, and even more after. The moment-to-moment loop became gather or fight enemies, refine, queue, repeat. And while that sounds dull, it's actually kind of satisfying at first. Because of the environment and combat systems, the desert is beautiful. Its harsh sun and the mechanic of jumping from shade to shade during daylight is actually quite solid. It never got in the way. I never died of dehydration or even came close to it, but it makes moving through the world more interesting. Vehicles handle well, and it's so nice going from walking to riding a bike to then having a buggy that can mine for you. That's my next tip, by the way. Do not pass up on building the buggy. In fact, build it the moment you can. I was going to skip it because I yearned to fly above the sands, but when I went from mining iron by hand to mining it using the buggy's laser module, I'd say the amount of ore I gathered per trip increased by maybe 5 times. You get about twice as much ore from a node using the buggy than the handheld version, and the buggy can store a ton of resources. So you're getting more per node, getting it faster, and carrying more. Seriously, build it ASAP. You don't even have to get out. Playing solo, it's simple to switch seats and fill her up. And this led to some great satisfaction. Once you get the buggy that mines iron, iron becomes a non-issue. Same with aluminium. It's a strong progression system where early pain becomes later convenience, and the high of suddenly having endless supplies of iron to make steel after scraping bits together felt very, very good. Seeing my base expand, it was all going incredibly well. I was loving it. The combat, on the other hand, is passable. I'd even say the PvE combat was quite enjoyable, at least for the first 20-ish hours, but by the 30-hour mark, the combat became too formulaic for me. I could dispatch any enemy with ease. At that point, I was looking for a reason to continue, and what kept me going throughout was reaching the deep desert, or getting into some PvP. But let me first say, this game does still have some bugs, none that ruined my day, but they were annoying. I had one quest where quest enemies didn't spawn. It wasn't another player beating me there either. I was in the area for almost an hour, kept returning, and nothing. I googled it to confirm it's a common issue. I had my screen go black and never come back just because I spoke to an NPC. I had a death respawn timer so long I had time to contemplate my life choices. And let's not talk about the time I took a wrong turn escaping an exploding ship, and the game stun locked me for almost a full minute because it let me into a zone I shouldn't be in and then wouldn't let me leave. Also, how are ramps so broken? Not game breaking, just kind of disappointing. Oh, and early on, half my base suddenly didn't recognize me as the permission holder, which meant I had to start rebuilding. This hasn't happened again in the 45 hours since, but I digress. By the time I reached the deep desert, I realized solo play has a ceiling. One I expected, but a ceiling nonetheless. The world feels dead once the grind wears off, or PvE combat starts to feel stale. In 50 hours, the most meaningful player interaction I had was getting 1v3'd in the desert, losing my gear and my Thopter to a sandworm. And honestly, I had a ton of fun despite dying. It was hilarious trying to dodge multiple rockets. It showed me what's possible in PvP zones for groups. But as a solo player, it isn't a great environment to engage in PvP. So what about the endgame? The big question, the deep desert, the answer. It's a big desert? I really don't know what else to say. You fly around, you gather resources, and this is where I think groups and guilds will thrive. Playing with friends here would be fantastic. Dogfights, space raids, countering enemy squads on the ground. But as a solo player, you run into a duo, and let's be honest, your chances are low. Try fighting 2 PvE enemies in melee combat, and you'll see it's a headache. Your attacks are slow, you get interrupted constantly as a solo fighter, you're at a massive disadvantage. And if you die and respawn on your Thopter, they can chase you down, as they did to me. You need your Thopter in the desert, but when you die, you spawn on it, and if it breaks, you'll need another to get back out there. I went back after my death, flew around the desert for close to an hour, and I've been back multiple times. I saw 3 players total, and when I did find someone, they quickly ran to a second player and I knew I had to bail. Now, this may be a symptom of early release. Give it a week, maybe more, and solo players might be out there. If I notice that, I will update with a pinned comment. But I think the biggest problem is that in Haga Basin, 40 players just isn't enough. This is where I'd expect more balanced PvP action for solo players, but the area is huge. I'm 50 hours in of raiding open world outposts, mining for materials. I stumbled upon other players actively working in the same location maybe 2 or 3 times. I saw a bunch driving around, but driving past another player every couple of hours isn't very immersive. It gave me that, oh right, this is a multiplayer game feeling. Seeing other player built bases is fun, and some are gorgeous, but it all feels empty. I flew around before recording to check out some amazing builds on my server, and I included mine too. Bet you can't pick it out. But let's get back to that ceiling I mentioned. With PvP looking very difficult to find, or at least meaningful solo, I turned to PvE. The combat starts fun, the abilities are varied, guns feel great to shoot. You've got decent armor options as well, but it gets stale. It turns into rock, paper, scissors, simply because the AI is so basic. They almost always run straight at you. It becomes, can you shoot them from range? If yes, great, they're dead. If not, do they have a shield? Yes, then it's melee time. Close the gap, spam attacks, they're dead. I take their blood and move on. The areas you fight in look great the first few times. Testing stations, crashed ships. The second time, you still think, nice. But then it's again and again. The combat doesn't really evolve. You've kind of got 4 enemy types. Melee, standard shooters, heavy weapons, and snipers. And each one has a really simple counter. I also worry for groups here. Despite this being a solo-focused video, I was able to run every stronghold, station, and ship solo with little to no trouble. At most, it took some patience. I can only imagine groups steamroll these areas with no real challenge. So that gameplay loop won't hold you long term. And as for PvP again, in my 50 hours, getting 3-manned by the Thopter boys was the extent of it. In Haga Basin, I literally spent 3 hours camping crash ships waiting on players. Saw no one. I think it's because those ships offer very specific resources. Once you have them, you don't often need to go back frequently to get them. They're used for armor and weapons, but I never felt the need to upgrade often. A single ship run sorted me out for a while. And if the other 40 players on the server aren't all going at the same time, you won't see them. Now, I might be able to engage in a lot more PvP in the future, but in the 50 hours leading up to now, I was wanting to engage in that and just wasn't able to. Now, I think there's a pretty easy solution there. I think they should just make areas of the Haga Basin PvP on, like larger swatches, maybe where people might gather, make it very clear to them. But I think make that bigger, allow that environment for players if they want it. And then there's the deep desert. As with the rest of the game, it's beautiful. But solo, I ask myself, why go? The risk kind of outweighs the reward. Yes, the zone offers rare materials, but if you can't engage in the PvP meaningfully, and the PvE is tiring, you've hit that ceiling I talked about, which means you don't go to the PvP zones, which means no real end game, because the Landsrad system realistically needs guilds or big groups to work on large projects or engage in meaningful PvP together. I'm not done. I'll keep trying. Maybe it's just launch timing, but I keep coming back to this. I've actively searched for PvP over hours and rarely found it, and never in a satisfying way as a solo player. Dune Awakening can be played solo, but it wasn't designed that way, and it shows. It's a gorgeous, grindy, sometimes frustrating sandbox, and yeah, pun intended. It's a desert out there. Beautiful, barren, and occasionally brutal. So to be fair, they have delivered on all promises. If you like crafting, refining, base building, and doing everything yourself, there's something here for you. And I definitely don't regret the 50 hours I've spent, and I'm definitely not done. Even dying in the desert was a fun experience. Getting gunned down and falling victim to my first sandworm death was surprisingly enjoyable because I knew the danger, and it was amazing to have that realized. But if you want longevity, fast progression, social encounters, or high-stakes PvP, solo might not be the way to go. Still, 50 hours later, I'm not done. I'm heading into the deep desert again, probably alone, probably undergeared, and probably to be eaten by another worm. But at least I'll have my buggy still there to get me back in the action quickly. Thanks for checking out this video. If you've enjoyed it, throw on a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more gaming content. For you being here, that's what really matters. If you're looking for even more content, I stream right here on YouTube and Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday, 4 PM Australian Western Standard Time. Until then, guys, have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.